All right, deep divers, welcome back. Today we're plunging into, well, a really complex and fascinating place, Mali. A West African nation, its story is often sort of misrepresented or just overlooked entirely, but we're talking about a history that shaped global networks and a culture that's seen as like an ancestor of all music. It's pretty incredible stuff. We've gathered just a ton of sources for this one: histories, cultural analyses, the works. Our job today
Yeah,
to kind of sift through it all for you, pull out the key bits so you really get what makes Mali tick.
absolutely. And what jumps out from the sources is that Mali isn't just, lines on a map. It's a true crossroads, defined by this incredibly deep ancient history, trade, amazing culture. We'll trace it all from early days, through these huge empires, right up to modern times that challenges the future.
Okay, let's get into it. Prepare for some surprises because Mali, it definitely delivers those. So let's start way back, way before colonial maps were even a thing. Our sources point to roots going back to 9,000 BC and wealth built on gold and salt.
That's right. And these resources, gold and salt, they weren't just valuable locally. They had huge global implications. They really opened the door for Islamic commercial networks to push deep into sub-Saharan Africa. And out of that grew these really powerful states, Ghana, Mali, Songhai. They ended up controlling the trans-Saharan trade in gold and salt, which was, well, absolutely pivotal for intercontinental commerce back then.
Right, so controlling the trade routes was key. But it wasn't only about money and goods, was it? These empires became known for learning, too.
Exactly. That's a crucial point. They established Islamic universities, in places like Timbuktu and Gao. And this wasn't just religious study. It fostered higher learning in pretty much all fields. So these cities, they attracted traders, sure, but also scholars, artisans, creating these incredibly vibrant intellectual centers.
Mhm.
And the manuscripts they found there, in Arabic, but also a unique local script, a dak, covering religion, science, commerce. I mean, they're rightly seen as one of Africa's greatest treasures. Shows a real depth of intellectual life.
That's amazing. Okay, let's zoom in then on the most famous one, the Mali Empire. And you have to start with its founder, Sundiata Keita.
Ah, Sundiata Keita. Born around 1217, his story is pretty legendary. He really built the foundation for what became one of the biggest, wealthiest empires in African history. He was exiled, by Sumaguru Kante, but fought back, won key battles in 1238, 1240, 1247, reclaimed his throne. But beyond the battles, his impact on law, society, politics was huge. Scholars talk about the Mali Charter. Think of it like an early constitution. It established principles like justice, equity, peace, really advanced ideas about good governance for that era. It set a standard.
Sounds like a real visionary, not just a warrior. What about practical things? How did he boost the empire day to day?
Oh, he was practical too. He's credited with bringing wheeled transport into West Africa. Think about the impact on trade, farming. He also pushed iron production. More iron meant better tools, farming larger areas, creating food surpluses, essential for growth. And strategically, he embraced Islam to boost trade links, built over 200 mosques. The famous ones in Janneh and Timbuktu owe their origins to him.
So you see this foundation being laid: trade, governance, agriculture, culture, and it led to this period of extraordinary prosperity, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you connect the dots, the empire's location was perfect. Caravans crossing the Sahara met traders from the Mediterranean. It was a hub. They even had possibly Africa's first bimetal currency. Gold tag zalt, silver tarnic. Shows real economic sophistication. All this wealth fueled incredible development. Lavish palaces in the capital, Niani, metalwork that was highly prized, advanced weaving, and pottery, two specific types, Ngolo and Tavares quartz pottery, were exported as far as Morocco. The craftsmanship was top-notch.
Incredible. And, well, you can't discuss the Mali Empire's peak without talking about Mansa Musa.
Right. Mansa Musa reigned 1312 to 1337, often called the richest person in all of history. And his Hajj, his pilgrimage to Mecca, it's legendary for a reason. Thousands of camels just loaded with gold. It was so extravagant that sources say it actually crashed the economies of Cairo and Medina, where he passed through because of the sheer amount of gold he spent and gave away.
That's mind-boggling wealth. But it wasn't just a display, was it? It had lasting impact.
Exactly. That journey put Mali firmly on the map for Europeans. It changed their whole perception of West Africa. And culturally, he invested heavily. Funded the Jinga Mosque in Timbuktu, supported the madrasas, the schools. That's what really cemented Timbuktu's reputation as one of the world's great centers of learning. Arabic became the language of diplomacy, of scholarship. It fostered this thriving intellectual climate, really quite ahead of its time.
So Mali had this incredible golden age, but empires rise and fall. What happened next? As Mali declined, another power, the Songhai Empire, rose up.
That's the pattern, isn't it? The Songhai were based closer to the Niger River, which was a huge advantage. They were also skilled horsemen, which helped them assert control, especially over the Tuareg people. Their capital, Gao, became the new major center for trade and farming, kind of taking over from Mali's cities.
And like Mali had Sundiata and Mansa Musa, Songhai had its own great leader, Askia Muhammad.
Yes, Askia Muhammad. He was a Muslim leader from Gao, and he took the Songhai Empire to its absolute peak. We're talking territory, wealth, cultural influence. His empire was vast. Only Jinneh managed to stay independent for a while, and his pilgrimage to Mecca, like Mansa Musa's, was huge, but maybe even more significant diplomatically. It really solidified Songhai's status in the Islamic world. Under him, Timbuktu hit another cultural high point, just churning out texts in Arabic astronomy, medicine, history, law, an amazing intellectual output.
So another golden age, in a sense. But again, empires don't last forever. What brought Songhai down?
Well, after Askia Muhammad died, things started to unravel. Lots of infighting, rival factions based on lineage, resentment simmering. It created this deep instability that no single ruler seemed able to fix. And then you had external pressure. Morocco was rising, and they had their eyes on the Sahara's resources, especially the salt mines like Tagaza, and maybe the Reagan gold mine too. This led to military conflict. In 1591, a Moroccan army using firearms, which the Songhai lacked, defeated the Songhai forces. They looted Timbuktu. By 1593, Gao itself was conquered, and that was pretty much the end of the Songhai Empire, a major turning point.
Wow, so the fall of this huge empire must have left a massive power vacuum. What did that mean for the region?
That's a really important question. The sources paint a bleak picture, actually. The land that was once unified under the Askia dynasty, it became fragmented. The great cities declined, some fell into ruin. You had all these different groups, different languages, traditions, with no central authority, no shared national identity. So city-states popped up, smaller kingdoms, even bandit groups. And tragically, this instability created the conditions for the slave trade to really take hold and expand in West Africa. A terrible consequence.
A really stark contrast to the organized empires before. And then eventually, European powers arrive on the scene, France in particular.
Yeah, colonization came relatively late to this part of Africa compared to coastal areas. France gradually asserted control in the late 19th century. And it's interesting, the sources note that the French did a lot of research beforehand, mapping, studying resources. But their whole approach, the civilizing mission, basically aimed to impose French culture, French systems. They often just ignored Mali's own long-standing political traditions, administrative structures, tried to make it a copy of France. This dismissal of local ways, as you can imagine, caused huge resentment, led to significant opposition. Sources say around 200,000 people actually left Mali to get away from French reforms.
So a period of external rule imposed on top of that fragmentation. Then comes the 20th century, World War II, and the winds of change globally, independence movements.
Exactly. After World War II, that drive for independence swept across Africa and Asia. Mali was definitely part of that. Malian nationalists, inspired by earlier revolutions like the American and French ones, started organizing, pushing for self-rule, democracy. A key party was the Union Sudanese, the U.S. party, founded in 1945. Nationalist, anti-colonial, it grew fast. But the French colonial authorities pushed back hard, tried to delegitimize the U.S. party, used state repression, and this predictably radicalized some of the nationalist leaders. They turned to mass mobilization, powerful slogans, really challenging French rule directly.
So a tense path to independence. Let's talk about Mali's first president, Modibo Keïta.
Right, Modibo Keïta. Born in Bamako, he became the first prime minister, then president, when Mali gained independence in 1960. He was very committed to socialism, Pan-Africanism. He had this vision of liberating all of West Africa. This stance, understandably, put him at odds with Western powers. Domestically, though, his socialist agricultural policies didn't work out so well. Led to economic problems, food prices went up, and his move towards one-party rule caused a lot of discontent, isolation. It all culminated in a military coup in 1968 that overthrew him.
So post-independence starts with high hopes, but quickly runs into difficulties. What's the pattern since then? The sources seem to describe this recurring cycle.
It does seem that way. Mali officially became a democratic republic in 1992. New constitution, multiple political parties allowed. It looked like a fresh start, a real commitment to democracy. But those hopes often haven't been fully realized. Political instability has remained a persistent issue. You see continued problems, misfortune, coup d'etat, even in the 21st century. The most recent one was August 2020. It makes you ask, as the sources do, why achieving stable political maturity has been such an ongoing challenge for Mali, despite these efforts.
And alongside the political instability, there are major economic hurdles, too.
Yeah, the economy's faced huge challenges since independence, despite that rich history of trade and production. A big one is dependency on imports. Makes the country vulnerable to global price shocks for essentials. Price instability internally is also a problem. And there's a lack of raw materials needed for developing local processing industries, which could create more value. Gold is still hugely important culturally and for revenue. But even there you see problems. Pollution from mining, wealth not being distributed evenly. And this idea of the mining curse seems relevant, where having valuable resources paradoxically hinders broader development. It's a known issue in many resource-rich nations. Attempts at modernization, like privatization, haven't really delivered the hoped-for results either, according to our sources.
And it's not just politics and economics. There are deep social issues woven into this story as well.
Absolutely. Historically, Mali was famous for its wealth, its industrious people, trade. But there was also this undercurrent, this high life, low life dynamic, jealousy between different groups, clans, that sometimes led to revolts. And today, you still see the echoes of that. Unresolved issues from past conflicts are a major challenge, especially the Tuareg rebellion in the north in 2012, which saw Islamist groups get involved. That led to brutal occupations, a terrible humanitarian crisis. International intervention was needed. These deep social divisions and the fallout from conflict, they continue to impact the country's stability and progress.
It's a lot of challenges. But amidst all this difficulty, what consistently shines through in the sources is Mali's incredibly vibrant culture.
That really is the heart of it, isn't it? Mali is this amazing crossroads of cultures. And two things really stand out. One is this deep-rooted hospitality. Foreigners often find it remarkably easy to connect with local life. The other is the absolute importance of the oral tradition. What's spoken, the stories told, the histories passed down verbally that carries immense weight, it's considered truth.
And the music. The sources make this huge claim, calling Mali music an ancient ancestor of all music. That's quite something.
It is a bold claim, but there's substance behind it. Mali is seen as having one of the world's richest reserves of traditional songs, often played freestyle, without written notation, using this incredible variety of regional instruments. Traditionally, songs are tied to village life, births, deaths, harvests, ceremonies. They chronicle everything. And even in modern Malian music, live singers, percussionists, they're still central. The focus is on the voice, the rhythm, the tradition, the meaning of the event. It's a different approach to making music than, say, Western classical traditions. Really unique.
And what about literature? Given that oral tradition is so strong.
Well, there is a rich written tradition, too, going back centuries. Remember those Arabic texts from Timbuktu in the 10th century? But what's maybe even more remarkable is how the oral literary tradition continues to thrive through the griots or Jeliu. These aren't just storytellers. They're historians, poets, musicians, genealogists, all rolled into one. They perform these complex oral compositions, often with audience interaction. It's a living art form. Many consider this oral tradition one of the greatest expressions of world literature and cultural heritage. It's vital.
So looking ahead then, Mali has this incredible cultural depth but faces serious challenges. What do the sources say about its future prospects? Where's the potential?
There's definitely potential on multiple fronts. Agriculture is huge. It employs around 80% of the people. So investing in sustainable farming, better infrastructure there, that's critical for growth. Then there's the mineral wealth, especially gold. If managed well, it could be a major asset. And Mali has abundant rivers and sunshine. Huge potential for hydropower, solar energy projects. That could reduce reliance on expensive imported electricity. The sources also point to a growing digital economy, which is interesting. And, of course, the potential for tourism based on its incredible cultural heritage. That seems largely untapped.
Lots of different avenues there. So pulling it all together, what could all this mean for Mali's role in West Africa? Can it become a stabilizing force?
Well, its location alone makes it potentially very influential. And the diverse population, the resources, the potential is immense. And despite all the conflicts, Mali has made efforts since independence. The move to multi-party politics in '92 was significant. It's also played a role in mediating conflicts between its neighbors, like Mauritania and Côte d'Ivoire. A really big factor could be the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. If that's fully implemented, it could really help Mali leverage its position, transform it from being seen as landlocked to being land-linked, connecting trade routes, fostering industry, diversifying the economy. That could be game-changing.
What an incredible journey we've taken. Through Mali's deep history, its significant challenges, but also its amazing resilience and spirit. From that staggering wealth of the old empires to these living oral traditions, Mali's significance is just undeniable, even if often overlooked.
Absolutely. And connecting it back, Mali's story really illustrates that idea. I think one source put it as, rare are the trees capable of bearing evolutions without dying. The struggles are real political instability, economic hardship, but so is the strength of those cultural roots that have survived for millennia, adapting, changing, but enduring.
Yeah. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it, with all that cultural richness, that history of ingenuity, those resources, what's the key? What could finally unlock Mali's full potential, allowing it to become that stable, prosperous heart of West Africa that its past suggests it could be? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Mali. We hope you feel a bit more informed, maybe more curious even, about this truly extraordinary country.